What's up, all you fans of the beautiful bounty hunters, Samus Aran? I'm Joe once again. We're going to talk about AM2R and everything Metroid in this here podcast. I'm with the man, the myth, the legend behind AM2R. Tell the people your name.
Hi, my name is Milton. Some people know me as Dr. M64. And that's me being a legend or a myth means that I actually don't exist and it's just a whole story to scare the kids away or something.
Well, you just had to take the wind out of my sails there, huh?
My
No,
apologies.
but seriously, I have before we get deep into this, I really have to thank you for coming on. I'm sure you've had bigger channels and bigger studio outlets, video game outlets, come to you and want you to come on. So I can't tell you how grateful I am that you decided to come on to my channel and my podcast.
It's always a pleasure. My doors are open to anybody. So you have you want to spend time wanted to learn about the project, you have my full cooperation, sir.
Okay, cool. So, then let's just start out with that. Tell me, let's just start out from the very beginning. Wind the clocks back 10 years ago. What mindset, what drove you to be like, yeah, I'm going to make AM2R?
Well, I was bored, pretty much. Back then, I had a recording studio with partners, and since we were just starting, we didn't have that many customers. That meant we had way too much dead time, and one can broom the floor so many times until getting bored. One of the first budget cuts that we made was the internet. Back then, it was very, very expensive. So since we both had internet at home, it was a little bit redundant to have another internet account dragging our bills. So I was bored without the internet, and I had a couple of emulators, and I did play some ROMs to kill time between customers. And I was struggling to decide what was going to be my next project. I already had started tinkering with Game Maker. I found it pretty interesting, and I wanted to do something a little bit more complex than simple arcade games. So why not make a remake of an established game? And since that would be taking care of all the design decisions, and it would be pretty much an exercise to actually start writing proper code. My programming knowledge was a little bit rusty by then. I wasn't that much of a programmer. So one of the games I did try out was Metroid 2. I found it to be interesting, but a little bit outdated. And it didn't seem to be that much of a complex game to mechanically update. I wasn't that much aware of the whole Metroid franchise. So it was just a tiny spaceman exploring caves and killing monsters. It sounded very straightforward. So I wanted to make it as good as I could. Once I played Zero Mission, that was pretty much the physics I wanted for the game. So I started using the sprites from Zero Mission as a starting point, and the game slowly started feeling a little bit Metroid-ish. After that, I did play for research Super Metroid for reals this time, and I pretty fucking loved. I fell in love with it. It's so amazing.
Yeah, Super Metroid is definitely they always say Super Metroid and Castlevania Symphony of the Night were those two games that actually spawned off and made the Metroidvania, sector of games. And as someone who has played Super Metroid, like myself and you, it's a fantastic game still to this day.
It was so different, It had the balls to have atmospheres and to be a dark sci-fi adventure, and that was not something that was common in the SNES. So I was pretty much blown away with it.
Yeah, that is definitely it's cool that it was just cool. Especially if you put your mindset back in that time, back in the 90s, of when games were just starting to come up and become their own thing, and you look at it as, here's this game now that's actually going to experiment with atmosphere, and it has that eerie sense. Still to this day, when I boot up the game and I have the lights off and it's just me, the controller, and the TV, you get that chill when you hear the Metroids, the Metroid sound in the beginning, start screen.
Yeah. So I released a small demo, and just featured a couple of levels, some power-ups, and a very improvised and rough Ridley fight, just to see what people thought about the whole engine and how it felt. And it had very good reception. By that time, I only had one trailer, and it was pretty much instantly famous. It was featured in many places, and suddenly I had people that were interested in actually giving me a hand. I tried to do some sprite work, and it was horrible. And from that point on, many people volunteered to give me a hand with the project on their free time, and just because they wanted to see this whole thing finished. Yeah, it's been a couple of years that the project has been on hold, and I was able to work on it sporadically. But on the last stretch, there was quite a change. I had already closed out I had to close down my studio. I'm actually working as a programmer for an insurance company. And in all that time, I did learn a little bit about project management, and I was able to apply that to AM2R. I pretty much have people collaborating from all the corners of the world, and managing free time for other people, and making sure their effort is actually properly used in the game is quite a challenge.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Like when I first started YouTube, me and the other couple writers, I told you my story beforehand, but me and a couple other writers, we actually started doing a podcast, and one was down in Brazil, the other one was in Great Britain, one was in California, and then there was me and Luke, who was down in Louisiana. So
wow, that must be a nightmare of time zones.
It was a nightmare, yeah. But I'm extremely grateful for those guys. You can still see some of the podcasts we have up on our other channel, which was Nilfinity Productions. But like I always said, like I wanted to write about games, and I wanted to write about other things too. And one day I hope to come back to that channel. But I was super grateful for those guys to actually come on. Once again, we were all doing this for free. So once again, but yeah, I can speak to how challenging it is to actually get people together and like set times and stuff. It still miss those guys though. They're good guys. Still miss them.
In my case, the people that did help me a lot in the last stretch were from the US, England, Denmark. What was the other one? Norway and Russia. So it was quite a mess to actually find the right time to communicate and Skype with the other people, just to go through all the stuff that was pending. So
yeah,
a couple of years before the actual release, we kind of have the idea of using the anniversary as an excuse to launch the game in the state, wherever the state it is. So it took a little bit of planning, and the last couple of months were chaotic. It was we were extremely productive, and it was chaos, but we actually made it in time. The final product, the first release, was very solid. There were very few issues that had to be patched later on, but overall, I'm pretty happy with how the game turned out to be.
Well, like speaking to like how you guys said you were rushed, and we'll get into it later, but like how quickly it was taken down right afterwards. Like I was replaying the game, obviously to get my bearings again, but like that game runs fantastically for not having any patches. Like I'm sorry, but wow, like I mean we'll get into like how great of a game it is later as well, but like that game for being 1.1 runs amazing, and if you compare that to other games like other AAA release games, people who get paid to make these games, I'm not going to shout out any names, but someone just released a newer game episode and it crashed on me. So
Ooh.
Just gonna throw that out there, not naming any names.
Okay, I have advantages of having this game being technically very humble. It's mostly 2D sprites, and that's pretty much it. But we did have very high quality standards regarding bugs and glitches and game crashing, those kind of things. Luckily, people were very helpful throughout the years when I was actually releasing demos. I opened up a forum, and people were actually very kind to actually point out things that could be improving and reporting bugs and crashes and those kind of things. So by the end of the process, I had a couple of years of actually good playtesting by Metroid fans, and that's invaluable, you know.
Now, okay, while we're on these topics here of like people helping you out and Metroidvania, the design of them. Well, like, how much of the improvement was you, like, just you, or how much involvement did these other people have, like, as far as like making the world of Metro AM2R look the way it does? Because, like, I went back and I watched the first trailer, and then I played the game, and it is just, it's apples to oranges how much different it is. So, like, were you not to be insultive or anything, but did you take a step back and be like, okay, yeah, you can do this because you know your stuff. I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just learning. So, like, how much of that was you? How much of that was the other guys? So, did the other guys teach you, and did you learn? Like, what was with that?
Okay, pretty much the entire programming, level design, and the soundtrack and the sound design was done entirely by me. I did have a little bit of help with some arrangements on the soundtrack. I did a little bit of sprite work, but I was able to actually work with sprite artists by doing some actual animation by myself. So I'm not that good at drawing stuff myself, but I'm actually pretty capable working with sprites by other people. So I'm still learning pixel art, but yes, there's quite a mixture of things that started as zero mission assets that they're slowly being edited to have a visual cohesion to something that's not so bright on the screen and have an atmosphere closer to Super Metroid. It's something that displays better on a big screen. And the artists were very receptive when I actually suggested changes. And since I do have a little bit of skill with Photoshop, if I needed to make a change, I didn't have to wait for the artist to make another revision. I actually could do tweaks and changes myself to some of the sprites or some frames of animation. So yes, I have a little bit of knowledge about that to not interfere with the artist with so many revisions. But yes, the art contributions were a huge improvement. One of the awesome artists that gave me a hand was Zim, Miss Azima Khan. She pretty much made a 3D model of Samus. Just to help a little bit with poses for the final screens, when you get the ending, you get to see Samus running or doing something else. And that 3D model was done to be a reference, so where each part was going to be positioned and have a nice, correct perspective. And before the game was released, that model was featured in a short film. Have you seen Metroid: The Sky Course?
No, I have not. Is that a fan film?
It's a small, short fan film. It's very awesome. And it features that 3D model.
Okay.
And yes, people have been
I know
expanding their portfolio quite a lot.
I've seen a couple. Let's see, Metroid Skyfalls.
You're gonna watch it right now?
Yeah, why not? No, I'm just gonna look it up and
right.
see, because I know I've seen a couple. No, have not seen that one. Cool, looks cool. Definitely gonna watch it after this now, but.
All right.
But no, I have not. Like I've seen one, but it had like live action mixes in with it, and it was cool. It was the acting was a bit stiff, but good on them.
Okay.
They made something. Like I try not to be too critical of people who have made stuff that I am not ever going to try. But at the same point in time, I'm not gonna just look over the fact of someone talking like this. Oh my lord, there is a Metroid next to me. You see what I'm saying? But anyways,
Yeah.
back to AM2R.
Yes. One of the aspects that was most interesting um, collaborating was the writing. I have a little bit of knowledge about the English language, but I'm not very proficient with it. So I did ask for collaborations, and the volunteers were very passionate about the entire Metroid universe. So we had to make sure that whatever we were including on the story didn't contradict anything in any of the games, including the Prime games. We even acknowledged the Prime games to be part of the timeline by doing some small references here and there. But it was very difficult to choose exactly what to show to the player. The log entries need to be small, concise, and not waste the player's time that much. So there was quite a lot that was cut, and it was all very interesting reading material. One of the writers was very proficient explaining how Metroids and that biology works. And if you read the material, it actually kind of makes sense, and it sounds scientific. You see that in the Discovery Channel pretty much, but we didn't find the proper place for that. So unfortunately, there were some very awesome pieces of contents that were cut in the end. It was a very tough decision.
Let me ask you this then: like, as you guys were researching like the Metroid timeline and like how Metroid worked, like the story of it and all that, were you a little miffed when you had that AM2R, or not AM2R, but SR388 was already destroyed supposedly in Metroid 1?
Yes, but so is Sebes, and we still have a.
No. I'm talking about if you read like if you go back, and this is like a English translation error, I believe, in the game manual, it says the Galactic Federation destroyed SR388.
Oh.
I was just
okay.
When because yeah, I read that manual a couple years ago, and I was just like, huh. So what is Samus exploring at this point?
Okay.
And then all the other games, SR388, 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 and I'm just like,
I'm pretty sure I did miss that piece of lore.
Yeah.
That's
One second.
just okay.
It's in the official Nintendo player's guide. Here.
Okay. I don't think I have read that one, so.
Yeah. Go on. In the year 2000.
You want me to entertain your listeners?
They destroyed it.
Oh.
Yeah, because of the Metroid, planet SR388 was completely destroyed.
Oh, wow. Well, that would make quite a lot of sense.
So I'm just I always chalked it up to like there's a bunch of horrible like translations back then. So yeah, Samus is just maybe Samus is on an acid trip. Maybe she's not really this big galactic bounty hunter. She's just
she certainly has quite a lot of trauma to justify all her psychosis.
Yeah.
If that would be the case.
Yeah, because like maybe she's just like has a psychotic break after watching Ridley kill her parents, and this is just her like coping with it.
Ooh, can you imagine if that's the actual twist ending for Metroid 5?
Oh, geez, that'd be amazing.
She wakes up in a hospital or some shit.
Yeah, we got the beginnings of a game theory here.
that would explain all the horrible continuity issues that LRM brought up too.
Oh, geez. I'm speaking as someone who has like, we'll get into this a little bit later, like with our histories of Metroid and all that. But I'm speaking as someone who's never really played through Other M. I've gotten about, I want to say I put like 2 hours in, and I was just, I can't do this. I can't do this. The Wii.
You have to be strong.
Oh yeah, but you know what? Someone stronger than me can try that. I mean, like that is, you want to talk about a horrible adaptation of a Metroid game. Just wow. I don't know. Like you shouldn't take my words with take my feelings with a grain of salt, because like I say, I never say you should absolutely judge a game unless it's Mighty Number 9 if you haven't played it fully.
I have not yet.
So there's a bunch of Metroid gaps, but we'll get into that later. Let's continue on with AM2R. So we started on, you guys were doing the lore. Go.
Yeah, that was pretty much the most interesting collaboration. The rest was just the process of testing the game and making sure that every bug was exterminated. We were successful for the most part. And yes, it's really awesome to finally see that countdown hit 0 and actually making it into releasing the game, how people enjoy it, dropping by some of the Twitch streams that were actually playing and enjoying the game for the first time. That was magic, One of the things I actually do all the time is whenever I release a demo, all the contents of that demo is confidential, so people are actually they are not having spoilers ahead. They actually have a small adventure for the first time. They only experience one area or whatever new contents there is on the demo, but for the full game, there were 2 huge areas that were new that people haven't seen before, many changes, and the final area and the final boss that was pretty epic. And seeing people enjoying that for the first time after all this work, it's amazing.
It made it worth it.
Exactly. Every single minute of development time was worth it.
Mm-hmm. So, you were probably on cloud 9 when you saw all this love and all that. So, I guess now we gotta go back. We gotta go to the negative side. How long after the release of the game was it that Nintendo contacted you?
Well, the direct contact, the email with the MCA and the demands of that was about a month later.
About a month.
Some of the download links were pretty much being taken down all the time, but those are automated processes. Mm-hmm. But words from the legal team that was actually on this case came on September. So yes, they were very thorough explaining the situation and the possible outcome. So right now I cannot afford to try to win a battle that is not actually winnable. So I have a lot to lose. And if I look back, AM2R was awesome. It was actually released. There's actually people playing. And
well, I think, wasn't it like 2 days after you released it? You had to take down the download link on your website. It was like 2 days or something. But the whole thing about the internet, once it's on the internet, it's never gone. And I've experienced that. Because as soon as you released it, I heard of it. And I was like, holy crap! There's an AM2R remake. I've never played Metroid 2. No one had a Game Boy when I was growing up. So I downloaded that, and I got about over halfway through the game, and I had a really, really crappy Lenovo Y70 laptop, for those of you guys wanting to know, and it crashed like 4 or 5 times. And it just got to the point where I was so pissed off at it, and I never re-downloaded AM2R because it was just horrible, And then a couple months back, when I actually got my PC, which isn't a piece of crap Lenovo, I re-downloaded AM2R, and I once again played through most of it. I'm super close to killing the final Metroid. I gotta be. I'm like down to 2, like after the second area or whatever, like when lava goes down, I'm down to like 2. And then I restarted again when I got you to come on. And like whenever I experience this game, it is just like, I'm only going to play for an hour. Just an hour, And then, it's 6 o'clock. I look over, and it's like 9 or 10. I'm just like, yeah, that was an hour.
Yes, my apologies. My game design surely got you into trouble.
Oh no, it's like two game genres that I absolutely love are platformers / running guns like Mega Man and Mario, and then the others are Metroidvania titles. And no matter what, even the worst Metroidvania titles that I've ever played, I've spent a lot of time just loving it because I love that idea of when you find something, it's always like, oh my god, I found this. Like, oh boy, instead of like in other games where it's just like, go here, okay, you're done. I'm just like, okay,
Yeah,
well,
the moment when you realize this thingy that you just found opens up so many possibilities.
yeah, and that's the best part. Like, I always say the best way you judge a Metroidvania title is by its progression through power. Like the stronger you get, the more you can progress through the game. And like there's Metroidvania games that do that excellently, like Super Metroid, Castlevania Symphony of the Night, I would even give Metroid, the original Metroid, a good shout out there because like that was like, I feel like that game does not get enough love, and the original Metroid was so good. But we'll get into this again later. So Nintendo files, whatever. And so now, let me ask you this though: when Nintendo contacted you to take down this game, did they tell you at the time that they were working on their own Metroid game? Because like it was less than a year later now, and they announced Samus Returns or Return of Samus.
No, I didn't have that information at all.
Okay.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't a confidential thingy or something. No, they just saw my unauthorized use of intellectual property, something that could confuse customers, and that's it. They pretty much asked me to stop distributing the game and the source code in any platform, and I had to comply.
You didn't. Was there ever that part in your mind where you're just like, maybe I can find a backdoor way of distributing like these updates or whatever, these updated versions, or was it just like, I don't want to deal with the trouble?
It was more like the second. I'm pretty sure these people have resources to find out IP addresses of file sharing sites or those kind of things. Torrents are not 100% anonymous, as far as I know, and word of mouth is going to be. People are going to be finding out if I made the updates eventually. So I wanted to. I had to move on. It was. Otherwise, it wouldn't be good for my health if I were to keep dwelling on this. So I started planning on the future.
Okay. So speaking of the future, good segue here. You just recently got hired by Moon Studios.
Yeah.
And, this is very recent. Like, at the time, it's like 7 days out. 7 days ago, you announced via Twitter that you were hired by Moon Studios. So what I want to know is, did Moon Studios approach you? Did you approach them? Was it kind of like a mutual thing? You heard of each other? Well, tell us the story here.
Well, it was just another day, and I did check my email, and I did find an email from Thomas, the CEO of Moon Studios, explaining his what Ori and the Blind Forest is, and offering me a position. And at that point, I kind of freaked out. I couldn't believe it. A couple of weeks ago, I had played Ori and the Blind Forest for the first time. I got it on Steam sale, and I thought it was pretty awesome. There's some very interesting mechanics, and the game is actually gorgeous.
Oh, okay. We'll get into Ori later as well, but because as a game, yeah, Ori is a great game. It looks amazing, but it definitely has some problems, and those are problems that I just, problems that I always look at, and I'm just like, guys, just a little tweaking, just a little, would have made it so much better.
I played the Definitive Edition. Maybe some of those issues were addressed out there. Possibly.
Maybe. I have the original version, but I did just recently update to the other one. All
right.
I had downloaded it on my Xbox. It was like you paid an extra $5. You got the definitive. So I, got to the point where I could play a little of the DLC, which just
Mm-hmm.
feels like it was very just slapped on. But it's good. Like Ori and the Blind Forest is definitely like challenging, but it goes back to like my biggest problem with Metroidvania games, and that is Ori never feels strong enough. You know what I mean? Ori is always this delicate little flower that is always gonna get hit, and it just sometimes I understand that point, but maybe it's just like how I like when I approach it and I'm 10 hours into the game, and this enemy takes me out in a couple hits. I'm just like, I understand. You made him stronger. But at the same point in time, I just collected almost all the health orbs. The other one I need, the last one I need, is right in front of me, and you just killed me right before I got there. So
Okay, that's also kind of like a narrative approach of describing what the character is. If we go to the other end of the spectrum, by the end game, Samus is so strong. She pretty much is a tank, a moving tank.
yeah,
And the game actually stops being a challenge at all. You got Screw Attack and the Gravity Suit. Pretty much nothing can stop you. And any challenges that come from that point on are merely artificial because she is actually insanely powerful.
yeah,
In this case, it's the exact opposite. This is just a very tiny, little, delicate creature that's insanely floaty and nimble and has very good mobility to avoid conflict. And the overall design, I think it revolves more around that compared to straight combat.
yeah. I can agree with you, but at the same point in time, it's just like I would have. When you're almost at the full amount of health and a guy takes you out in 1 or 2 hits, I'm just like, okay, if you're a boss, that's acceptable. But if you're not, it's just bull. Like it just
I
give me
understand.
that third hit. Just give me that third hit, and I would have been fine. But just the fact that, and sometimes like they shoot you off screen, and you just like, it's off. It's off. You can't do it. You can't hit them off screen, but they can hit you off screen, and it is just ridiculous. And I'm just like, just a little tweaking what I'm trying to do. I still maintain that Ori and the Blind Forest is a fantastic game, and if you're looking for a challenging Metroidvania, that's the way to go. But it's just like just a little tweaking right there, because like sometimes that just really pisses you off. When you're just like you need that one little bit of health that's just off screen, and you haven't got to the point where it comes to you yet, and then hits you and you're dead. I'm just like,
Yes,
some
I
of these
understand.
guys have like the best aim too. Oh, off the backboard, blindfolded. I'm just like, just bull.
But that's also part of the mechanic, the bashing ability.
Mm-hmm.
These things need to be aiming at you because you need to use their projectiles to move around sometime. So, yeah, I understand it's insanely frustrating to get hit by a projectile that you didn't see coming, but in some places it's actually needed to actually move around.
Yeah, no, fantastic game. Still a fantastic game. Has some. You can tell like it was definitely Moon Studios' first game, but like as a first game goes, that is a amazing looking, fantastic game. I have my rage quit moments with it, but it usually passes, and I can usually put that back and be like, yeah, you know what, it's my fault, but still.
All right, I'll do my best to provide at least my point of view and whatever I can actually contribute to try to make all these situations that require conflict a little bit more fair than the situations to describe. So,
yeah, but it's still like Ori and the Blind Forest was definitely, and it's heavily Metroid inspired. Like you can see, like with the atmosphere, like we talked about earlier, it's just so heavy in that game.
Certainly,
it's really good, and yeah, definitely like worth. If you guys haven't played Ori and the Blind Forest, and I think what is it like $10 on Steam now? Like, yeah,
I think so. Yes.
Yeah, it's definitely worth playing. You just buy it and play that game. It's worth the $10. But yeah. So is there like you said you played Ori and the Blind Forest right before though. We're gonna get back to the podcast, but we get off on tangents. Maybe we just ought to just right. Anyways,
those are the most interesting talks. When you derail into interesting stuff.
Yeah, I have a bunch of notes here I wanted to get into, but But it's just you were just having so much fun talking because once again, it's basically two big Metroidvania fans, two big video game nerds here just talking, and it's one guy who's actually made a video game and one guy that just plays maybe too many of them.
That's a good combination, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose. Anyways, but like. You played Ori and the Blind Forest. You thought it was fine. Like, did you think, oh my god, Destiny, I played their game and now they contacted me.
Not with that cliche voice, but kind of, yes. It was pretty. It was pretty shocking. At first, I thought of the possibility of just this guy just being a troll and impersonating someone on the industry. I did some checks, and this was the real guy, and actually got to talk to some of the members of the entire team, and they are very awesome people. You actually know, and you can see that these are not the typical corporate game makers. These are artists, people that take their time to craft their work, and it's you can actually see the results in Ori, even if the some of the designs are not. You don't agree with some of the designs, you can actually see the passion and love that these people put into the game.
Oh, yeah.
And I was actually able to talk to these people. They are nice, they are simple, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be amazing to work with these awesome professionals.
Yeah, I maintain, Ori and the Blind Forest is a beautiful game, and, I always say when it works, but then, when those annoying moments happen, it's just, to me, it's just and it's not so much I'm frustrated with the game as I'm frustrated with myself a lot of the times, but I'm just like, oh my god, I can't believe you just sniped me from off the screen. And I'm just when you do the when you can jump up and you can shoot off from an enemy projectile, and sometimes if you get too close, the projectile will hit you and you'll take damage. It's like, I understand that. But at the same point in time, if you tell me I can do that, you let me do that, how come I now get hit? It's kind of just like, well, dummy, you did it wrong. And I'm just like, oh, okay. I mean, I understand it's my fault, but seriously, maybe just not allow me to take damage when I'm dodging?
Yes.
The game
that did happen to me quite a lot too.
The game acknowledges that I hit it right. The game acknowledges that by me being able to use the momentum. But when the game then acknowledges that it also hit me, I'm just like, so you want your cake and you want to eat it too? Fine. It's just like those little things. And the fact of the matter is, here I am nitpicking on the little things of this game. And that should speak out a lot, to how good Ori is. When you have to actively look for the little things in a game and not the big broad strokes of the game. Instead of, you're gonna, you take damage when you try to do the dodge, or some enemy shoots you from off screen. The rest of it, Ori is a fantastic game, especially if you look at it I'm just nitpicking.
Certainly. So I'm looking forward to see what the sequel has to offer, and certainly I will try to avoid that problem at all if it's within my reach. So I usually did suffer that situation myself too.
Well, if you're gonna be doing the level design like you say, I don't think it's gonna be a problem. From what I played of AM2R, the level design is amazing.
Well, I think so.
You know your stuff, so.
Well, it's one of the benefits of having to study all the rest of the Metroid level designs. One has to look a little bit of inspiration and what does the game work. Super Metroid works for various reasons besides atmosphere, and the level design, the way the progression is made, how the level flows, how the power-ups are hidden, how some of the power-ups are required and expected for the player to get. Those kind of things are very different in between all the Metroids, and having to study that and how that works certainly gave me tools to apply to AM2R up to a certain degree. I followed the original design to a point, but some of the later areas are a lot more original, and I did try to apply those elements by myself with a new twist.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that's just had to be done, because you're taking a game that was released on the Game Boy. with its
Mm-hmm.
monochrome screen, and it's dot matrix. And then you gotta take that, and now you gotta bring it to a modern day Windows PC, and yeah, remake that. Like, you go ahead and remake that, and it's very much like you took the route of I'm gonna go with sprites, 2D, and all that. And now it's interesting to see that Nintendo was sat back and was just like, okay, we're gonna let these guys, what is their name? The guys behind
Mercury Stream.
uh, Media Stream. Either way, I don't know. I'll look it up.
I believe it's Mercury Steam.
Mercury Stream. Yeah, you're right. But like those guys went along with the idea of, okay, we're gonna go with sprites. We're not gonna go with sprites. I mean, we're gonna go with polygons, and it's gonna be 2.5D. It's gonna be very much like a GameCube-esque looking game, So it's cool to see that, and by all accounts, it looks like Metroid: Return to Samus is amazing looking, and I'm definitely gonna buy that on my 3DS when I get the chance. Wish it was on my Switch, but beggars can't be choosers. But while we're on this topic, though, what was your feeling like when they announced, Samus Return of Samus? Were you just like, oh, no, that makes sense, or you jackasses I would have just made this game for you, and you could have put it up on your eShop?
Well, it was quite a surprise. I was actually taking a nap by then. I had completely forgotten about E3 that day, and suddenly my phone started ringing all the time. The Twitter notifications went crazy.
Yeah.
And when I saw the trailer, it was strange. It was my first reaction was, wow. So that's how a Zeta Metroid looks with a budget. That looks fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And
now, do you own a 3DS?
No, sir.
Is this game gonna make you go out and buy a 3DS?
I'm starting to look into some prices, and it's not entirely out of question.
Because I had a friend who came to me and was just like, did you hear of Return of Samus? Or Samus Returns? And I'm just like, yeah, I watched the E3 coverage. I did a video on the two Metroid games. He goes, oh my god, I'm gonna go buy a 2DS. I'm like, why? Just buy a 3DS XL. No, a new 3DS. Like, what's wrong with you? He goes, well, the 2DS is cheaper. I go, yeah, but it's also like crappy looking, and 3DS is better. So we went out and bought a new 3DS for it.
With all the import fees and all the stuff that we need to get through to get one of those, pretty much the 3DS XL and the 2DS, the new 2DS, are pretty much at the same price. How's the 3D? How's the 3D thingy working? Is it?
It's a slider
good enough
on the screen.
Okay, but is the effect convincing? Is it?
I have not been able to go hands-on. I am in a remote area of the United States, so they are not going to bring Metroid or Samus Returns anywhere near me.
No. But
as far as like, the
overall 3D effect, is it too distracting? Because I can't decide if I'm going to be getting a 2DS or a 3DS. Is the 3D on the screen worth the extra bucks?
It all depends, because like I'm one of those guys that barely uses the 3D. But at the same point in time, I bought a new 3DS XL because it has like the second joystick, and it's pretty nice. Like, the stronger processor and all that is really cool. But if you're really looking into getting a new 3DS or a 3DS, I would get the new 2DS XL, which is basically the new 3DS XL, but they stripped it with is 3D. And
awesome.
I think that's cheaper than the 3DS, and it's also like supposed to be more durable or whatever. But yeah, I mean, if it was me, and if it looked about the same price, and you wanted, do I want a 2DS or a 3DS? I'd just go with the 3DS because I feel like I think it looks cooler. But once again, that's my aesthetic choice kind of thing instead of like the plastic little light blue. Now then again, if they were to make a plastic with the red rings around it, I might consider getting one. Because I like that color scheme, if you haven't seen my logo.
All right. It's good to know, sir.
But yeah, I mean, back to Samus Returns though, but you're just like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
I actually do like some of the ideas. The counter mechanic looks interesting. I'm really not sure how easy it is to pull off. or if it's going to be making the game way too easy for people that can pull it off consistently. I'm really curious on seeing how that mechanic is going to be used on the later enemies, like the Omega Metros and the Queen fight.
Well, I wonder if they're just
Yeah.
not going to allow you to do it. You see what I'm saying? Because by all accounts, from people that I've heard talk about it, they keep saying how the counter mechanic is super strong and allows people to like take things out really easily. But at the same point in time, like they're worried about it overpowering in the later sections of the game. So I'm thinking,
Maybe they're going to be making the attacks less telegraphed for the bigger enemies, so it's possible but insanely tricky.
yeah,
Maybe.
but would I'm thinking like if you would make it less telegraphed, people would start to feel a little cheated. You know what I mean? Well, he didn't telegraph that he was going to do that move. I could have dodged it. Oh my god, damn Nintendo. So. I'm thinking more along the lines of maybe there's a shield or something you gotta take out before they can do it. There's gotta
Oh yeah, that's another possibility.
like that. I believe in Nintendo, but this is Mercury Stream or whatever. But Nintendo's definitely gonna have a hand in this.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that we're gonna see something. I don't know if they just won't allow it, or maybe there'll be a section of the game where they won't allow you to do the dodge roll, or the dodge or the counter and all that, and then you'll learn something new about doing the dodge and the counter. So then you will be able to do it, but it'll take another couple button prompts or something. There's
I
a
guess
1,001
I
ways
guess
they
we'll
could
have to.
approach this.
I guess we'll have to wait and see how it turns out.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely gonna get that. That new Metroid game. Psh, it's all over. I'm all over that. But like, okay, we keep going off on these tangents, and I said throughout this podcast that we're gonna get back to it later. So let's just go into this now. Like, what is your history with the Metroid franchise? Like, for my history, it was growing up. We didn't really get a lot of video games. Metroid was definitely nowhere near me until like a couple years ago. But my friend had, I believe, a copy of Metroid Fusion or Zero Mission on his Game Boy Advance SP, and I had a Game Boy Advance SP, and we would trade games and stuff. And that was one game that I was obsessed with. And this was just obsessive. Like, and this was back in the time when you didn't care about story and all that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, story, skip it. Let me play. So I played, and I just obsessed with that game. I don't think I ever fully completed it before I gave it back to him, but that was something. And then, when on my, would it be 11th or 12th birthday? Sometime when the GameCube was out. It was my birthday. My friend brought over Metroid Prime, and we played through the entirety of Metroid Prime, and then. And then that was basically it until about 2 years ago when I got heavily into video games when I had, pocket change and stuff. And I bought, Metroid, Super Metroid, Metroid Zero Mission, Metroid Fusion, all the Metroid games, and now I'm just working my way through them. And it's
awesome.
I love these games. Like I can honestly say like that, and that's why I always say like, I don't think the original Metroid gets enough love for what it did for its time. Like, if you go back once again to that mindset of the NES era, when you're dealing with Mario and, jumping over this pit and Mega Man, and then you look at Metroid and how it's basically a open world game where you can go anywhere and do a lot of the stuff, but it will rock you if you're not careful. Like, that game is tough. And you gotta be
Yes,
able to
I wasn't able to complete it myself.
You weren't?
Nope. The original NES one? No, I didn't.
Well, you're not a fan. Get off this podcast.
Okay, bye.
Bye. No, but like oh my god, I that was so tough playing that game, and it was funny because I beat there's only 3 bosses in the original Metroid. There's Mother Brain, Kraid, and Ridley. And legitimately, I beat Kraid, Ridley, and Mother Brain no problem. But where I died the most was trying to jump up the platforms to get out.
Wow.
That's where I died the most because it's just like as good as that game is. There's definitely like the screw attack jump. It just initiates in the worst moments. Like Oh my god. So then eventually it took me. Almost used up all the time it took me, but I eventually got up. But I was very slow and cautious with it. And then I went into Super Metroid and AM2R, and like I said, I haven't finished AM2R, but I'm very close. It just I gotta find the time, and I gotta and I gotta get to the point where my computer won't crash. Because my
Okay.
first time through AM2R I was super close. I was like, I think I had like not even I was on the last Metroid, and right before you go to the final Metro, the Mother Metroid or whatever, and that's when I closed the game out that night, and I came home the next day, fired up the PC, the laptop, and it just crashed, and I was pissed because not only was I working on that, I was also working on a Infamous review, and I had 17 hours of Infamous gameplay footage.
Wow.
And yeah, and I was just, oh my god, I was so pissed. I guess that all gone. But anyways, like I want to hear your story. Like where does Metro? We kind of glazed over it a little bit, but Metroid.
Okay, so the first I actually completed was Zero Mission. Then I did try Fusion. By sheer curiosity, in one of my pickups, I actually got the Metroid 2 card. And since I did have a Game Boy Advance SP, I actually did try it out and see how this franchise that I didn't know much about has evolved over time. And it was quite a change. I had known about Super Metroid a bit. I did try it out once, and it didn't hook me up. It didn't hook me up that much. But having given it a second try after starting the project, pretty much like research, it was pretty awesome. Just taking the time to play the game, taking the time to actually play and enjoy the game, thinking about the map layout, the possibilities, how to explore those kind of things, getting into the mindset that the game demands was necessary. And after that, I actually enjoyed the game quite a lot. After that, sometime later, I was actually able to get a Wii, and I did try Other M first. I played it, I survived it. I did like the mobility of Samus in that game on the side scrolling sections. The first person was hit or miss, but I really found the athletic movement that Samus had in that game to be very awesome. Then I discovered the Prime game. I played the Prime trilogy. It was different. I felt that Samus pretty much moved like a tank at first, but all the design choices that rely more on the environment design and how it tells the story through that entirely through the environment was very awesome. That's maybe getting into the Prime trilogy so late after AM2R was taking shape. Pretty much explains why there is not that many elements of Metroid Prime in the core design. AM2R is strictly a 2D game, and there's no features from Prime, like manual scanning of environments and things that were already starting to pop up into other fan games by that time. And I was just making it simple and action-based, pretty much like Zero Mission. But I had to acknowledge the Prime series at some point in some way. So including that as part of the story here and there was the way I actually felt was good enough.
Yeah. Metroid Prime would have been actually challenging for you, wouldn't it? I mean, you can't really take a 2D game into first-person space, though, huh? Like, were there any objects after you were playing it, though, that you were sitting there and you sat back and was like, man, I could add this, but we'd have to restructure so much?
There were a couple of boss fights that were scrapped, mostly because we couldn't find proper places to actually make the fight work. Some of the planned places had a very powerful Samus by that time. So the fight would be either way too easy or way too repetitive, or would have to be insanely cheap for it to actually be a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to scrap one entire mini boss that was already had a nice sprite set already in the works. Other than that, some very small things that were planned for updates. There were some missing enemies from the original Metroid 2 that were going to be making an appearance, and they were so minor and so insignificant that they were left out for a patch later on. Those never occurred.
Okay. So, like, is there any other games, like, any like, if you could go back right now and change one thing in that game, what you know, or change or add, what would be one that you would want to?
You mean in AM2R?
Yeah.
Maybe I should have made a little bit. I should have spent more time focusing on balancing the Omega fights.
Mm.
The first Omega was a little bit hard on the first release, and there's no save point nearby. So if the player gets killed, it's very tedious to actually backtrack, go back and do the entire first alpha, that kind of thing again. It's very time consuming. That was the only thing that's not up to the standard of the rest of the game. That would need my change.
Mm-hmm. Okay, is there like anything else like Metroid wise? Maybe after you saw the counter system in AM2 or in the Metroid 2 remake, are you thinking, would you be like, oh, it'd be cool to try and add something like that, or is that just something that you think would only work in like a 2.5D setting?
No, it's not exclusive to that, but that was not something that I played around. I keep I one of the very first decisions was to be sticking to the original design as much as possible. So people are going to be recognizing Metroid 2 when they are playing this. And the changes were pretty much done to the Metroids. Samus is pretty much controls like a Zero Mission, and that's pretty much it. It has to feel like the similar, familiar Samus we all know, but she's in this world that hasn't been explored that much, and opening up the possibilities to feel familiarity with the character, but being into the unknown and not knowing what to expect. I thought that focus was more interesting. I didn't want to experiment that much with Samus. No new suits or new strange beams or strange abilities. Just keeping her classic with the elements that we already know, and make the environment the star of the show.
Well, I feel like that's also something that you captured pretty good in the Metroid 2 remake, and that is like Metroid and Metroid, Super Metroid, to an extent, like Fusion from what I played, is all about like exploring to find these things and kill it, and exploring like what's going on here, what's oh, I gotta stop this, I gotta stop these guys from using them, like that. And Metroid 2 was very much go here, kill everything, and kick ass and take some names. And I feel like that's why in AM2R, like the whole fast pace, how Samus moves and all that is so good in AM2R, because like it is, Samus isn't being cautious. She's just like, I'm gonna kill anything I see. I'm just off the ship. I got my missiles. I'm ready to go. I'm just gonna kill whatever, whoever crosses me. I feel like that's what works so good for AM2R, especially like you can see that in the new Nintendo's remake of it too, with the counter system and how Samus is moving, like, and I feel like that works so good for the story of Metroid 2.
Certainly. This new remake seems to be expanding quite a lot on Samus and how she works, and that's awesome. I went with something that's more classical, so people can relate directly to Samus, since it's just regular old Samus in a new place. But seeing these risky new mechanics expanding upon the characters that we already know is awesome. That has a risk of being something polarizing if it's the abilities don't happen to work well within the design. But I'm pretty confident that these guys know what they're doing, and so far, what I've seen so far, this seems to be a pretty solid game.
Yeah, I'm excited for it, like we said before, but I think it's cool. I just got to give you props for what you did there because that was really cool. I really did. I was like, this makes so much more sense than like if you, because I have the original Game Boy cartridge and I played a little bit of it, but she moves a little sluggish and she's not as agile. You know what I mean? But then again, you got to
Mm-hmm.
give it credit. I mean, it's on a Game Boy. I think it isn't
Certainly.
exactly the peak of. It's not like you're carrying around a computer or anything.
No, with the limited hardware, these guys were making an entire Metroid game work in a tiny cartridge, and the way that they actually pulled it off is very ingenious.
Well, you gotta give Gunpei Yokoi some credit. You know, like that was his baby. The Game Boy was his
Hmm.
baby, and it's sad that he died soon after. I mean, I was kind of curious. I'd be kind of curious to see what would happen if what would have happened after Super Metroid. You know, because he died after the Virtual Boy. And like
Mm.
maybe what directions would have Metroid gone if he would have continued on. But yeah, I don't
Mm.
know. I gotta ask you this one question before we wrap
All
up,
right.
and this is from Peter because he sent me. He was the only one to send in a message. So for all you guys listening, if you want to be a part of these shows I do, I usually tweet out or add it on Facebook. And he asked, I'd like to hear some of his thoughts on how he approaches the level design in Ori and the Blind Furnace, Ori versus how he did with AM2R, and also how he feels about focusing specifically on level design as part of Moon Studios compared to AM2R, where he was doing, all basically everything.
Well, for once, it's quite a relief that I don't have to spend time fixing bugs and stuff. Working with something that's a working engine and having very talented engineers taking care of the engine is pretty awesome. Level design is very interesting, and it all boils down to pretty much the point of view of the player. Metroid players have a very different mindset to the people that play Ori. Ori is an adventure on a forest, and you're trying to restore balance to the nature. And you have quite a lot of information already. You have a very detailed map. You have an objective that you need to follow. You actually know in the general direction that you need to explore, and it doesn't require that much thought. You just focus on the adventure and all the obstacles and have fun looking at the insanely detailed environment. Uh, Metroid, on the other hand, requires the player to be alert. You're entering into unknown territory, there's danger everywhere, and the minimap is an integral part of the design. You pretty much have to design places so whenever you have to backtrack with a new ability, you actually get to see some incomplete part of the map, hinting the player that you need to go there for next. Those kind of things are pretty much around how the player is thinking and how much has the player mastered the ability that's going to be tested on the current place. So both have the same element of having the player experiment a little bit with the new acquired abilities, but Metroid always feels a little bit more dangerous. There's always some sort of conflict and fighting, uh, some set piece right after you get a new beam, and or they are actually rewards after beating bosses. There's no boss fights in Ori, so things have a little bit of a different pacing.
Hey, that's
But
not true. Ori faces a giant owl.
does Ori destroy it with a
Okay,
giant
okay,
beam
and
or
you know
something?
what? It's not really much of a boss fight, but still, she takes on a giant owl.
It's their lovely chase set
It's
pieces,
very
and
one-sided. It's a very one-sided fight, but at the same point in
yeah,
time, boss fight.
yeah. Well, if you want to count it as a bot fight, also awesome. It works. Um, yeah, it's in the core they are very similar levels. You have player progression, and it needs to flow properly so the player doesn't get bored or the backtracking isn't boring. Um,
Yeah, which
in
is
the
why
end,
the definitive edition, when you can warp, is just 10 times better than the original in Ori, because
I heard that complaint quite a lot. I need to try the original version and see how
oh my god.
backtracking is as tedious as they say or not.
Just don't, because I hate to say it, like there's some sections in like this is another problem in Ori's map is in Ori's map the sections of the world are very divided. There are some areas that cross over, but not like any, not as good as they should, and that so like Ori is constantly like when you used to have to backtrack, it was always just like okay, pause, look at the map, okay, move a little bit more, pause, look at the map. Because there's no mini map in Ori either, and that's something that's like Metroid is so good about because you have that mini map, so you can kind of see stuff. But no, Ori and the Blind Forces or the original version was just so bad because it's just like
and the mini
God.
map would help up to a certain point. The design is so organic that it's not divided into rooms. You don't translate that into small rectangles.
Yeah.
So
no, I understand. I understand why they did that. Like you said, with that reason. But I think it's also like they wanted to keep the screen not so cluttered. You know what I mean? Because let's be honest, like if you look at Ori and then you see a moving picture, not so much as a video game. And if you had Ori with a mini map up in the right hand corner, you'd be like, okay, this is a video game. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, and it makes sense to have Samus display ammunition and health and energy, a minimap. It kind of feels like an extension of what she gets to see on her helmet. So
yeah,
you can actually have that navigation aid up there. That's also part of orientating the player and pretty much evaluating how much does the player know about the environment and how can I actually guide the player without blatantly telling them where to go.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it's just amazing. Like this whole like how Moon Studios took that and was like, okay, you can see a lot of it in Moon Studios, like how they took their options and they went for the more artistic route than where other people did, and that's super cool. And like I said, I keep saying this, like I feel like someone's probably gonna hear this and be like, oh, you didn't like Ori, God, and hate on me, but. Ori is a fantastic game, and like I said, I just nitpick, and when you just look at the nitpicks just because you want to find something wrong with the game because it wronged you in some way or you feel it wronged you. But I maintain that Ori is a fantastic game.
Awesome. Let's hope that the sequel doesn't have that same problem.
I hope. You better do a good job because now I got your contact info. It's gonna.
Oh, okay. No pressure though.
No pressure. No, It's super cool though. I'm excited for you to, I'm excited to see what you bring there because one of the biggest problems in Ori and the Blind Forest is I felt the hidden areas in the map, were just a little too easy to find even before you got the ability to, see those hidden areas. I was just like, it needs a little bit more. You need a little bit more, There are some out there that you do, and it's like, oh, cool, that was cool. I didn't notice that, But then there was others where it's just like, well, that was, staring me right in the face as someone who's played probably way too many Metroidvania titles.
Maybe we have a very open perception of stuff. We are very Metroidy.
Yeah, I think that might be a lot of my problem, because like if I were to sit down, say my brother or another one of my friends down to play a Metroid game, they wouldn't look, they just, power through the levels and they wouldn't find nearly as much stuff as like you or I would. But then again, like me and you, we're just like, oh my God, a Metroid game? I'm just going to spend like 30 hours in this thing because, I got no better time. And everybody else just like, oh, well, that was fun. I ain't going to look for the final little bit of peace, Like, one of the Metroidvania titles I always play the crap out of, and I love this one to death. And if you haven't played it, or anybody listening hasn't played it, I highly recommend you buy this game immediately and play it. And that is Shadow Complex.
Oh, yes.
That
one's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that is a Metroid game, but it's not, like, it is the most Metroidvania game ever. That it's not a Metroid game, And
I found the 3D animations to look strange with the platform physics. The interpolation between animations is weird, but once you get used to it, it kind of It
I
feels
just
great.
that is one of those games where like legitimately I if I'm not playing anything or if I'm not really in the mood, I'll just pop on Shadow Complex and play it. Like that game is truly amazing. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. But like one of my biggest things is like in Shadow Complex, I'll be like, I'm just gonna try and go for a trophy, but then I end up just, oh, I know where this is, and I'll just grab this, and I'm just like, well, I can't get the trophy now because I got too many items, so I'll just, I'll just get all the gold and collect everything, and I'll just 100% the map while I'm at it. Like, no big deal.
Yes, the only thing I have with that game is that the end sequence feels a little bit out of place.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe replace that with some more epic boss fights instead of having to hit switches in the middle of gunfight.
Yeah.
But the rest of the game is very solid. I did enjoy it quite a lot.
Well, like we talked earlier, the spectrum of Oi is always weak and Samus becomes a tank. Well, then where you meet in the middle of Shadow Complex, and Shadow Complex is you start out super weak and you become super strong, you know what I mean? And it's just like, once you get the shotgun in Shadow Complex, all the difficulty is gone. Because you just walk up, just shoot it, and no big deal. Oh, big guy with a machine gun, I got this. It's just like, it works to an extent, but at the same point in time, it's definitely overpowered. And yeah, the ending sequence does stand out of place. And now, let me ask you this though, since we're on the topic of it. Do you think they're gonna make a sequel to Shadow Complex? Because he's got the shotgun or whatever gun you pointed at the guy, and she kills him. Sorry, spoiler alert for an 8-year-old game. And they're just like, well, can't tell you what's going on here, but you can come with us. And he goes with them. I'm just like, oh, maybe this is a sequel. I don't know. Cool game. Definitely worth playing. Like, if anybody has to touch that game, definitely worth playing.
If a sequel comes out,
yeah,
it will be welcome. I shall play it.
Oh, yeah. I played the crap out of that. Give me an excuse to do some Shadow Complex content, too. But yeah, amazing game. Like, I absolutely love Shadow Complex. Another good game, Axiom Verge. Have you played that one?
Oh, yes. That was the first game I played when I actually finished AM2R. I started playing all the all the Metroidvanias I didn't have time to play up to that point. Mm-hmm. And the first one was Axiom Verge. A pretty awesome game.
That is heavily Metroid inspired.
Yes.
Like, I had a friend who told me it's not like Metroid at all, and I looked at him like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, what? What part of that isn't Metroid inspired? It's an amazing game though. Like Tom Happ really deserves a lot of credit for what he did there, and that was one guy, kind of like you, but like one guy, and he did an amazing job.
Yeah, the ability of the character is very unique. It doesn't feel Metroidy, and the gunplay is a little bit more frantic. Mm-hmm. I did enjoy that a lot. So the item progression was also distinct, so it felt fresh. Even if the atmosphere felt kind of Metroidy, the overall game felt very original, and I did enjoy it quite a lot.
Mm-hmm. Well, is there any? I think we ought to wrap this thing up. So, is there anything else you want to talk about? Any? You did hint at another project that you're working on. You want to give any hints to that, or is that just hush hush at the moment?
No, at the moment, I had to pretty much put that project on the freezer. Oh. I was actually starting something new on Unity. It was going to be Metroidvania, but since I'll be pretty busy with Ori, though that thing is going to be taking a step back into my free time. But yes, it was going to be a 2D platformer.
Another Super Metroid remake coming 2024.
No. Enough remakes for me.
Enough remakes. This is going to be your own property?
Yes, something completely original, and making sure that whatever I do doesn't look like anything we've seen before.
Okay, so
that's quite difficult.
So now I'm curious, and now I don't know. So that's it. Okay. Well, now I want you to make this game, anyways. But anything else?
Um, Thank you to all the awesome listeners that are taking the time to actually listen to us, deviate from all the hot topics. Thank you for staying by. And if you need anything, any further news about AM2R or any future projects, you can find me on Twitter at AM2R Game or at Dr. M64. Looking forward to working with Moon Studios, and like always, thank you very much for supporting AM2R and for all the awesomeness.
Yeah, I'll put all your social media links down in the description below.
Awesome.
But once again, I gotta thank you for coming on. I mean, like, we didn't stay on topic that good, but
I'm a terrible guest.
I feel like this was
you can say it.
I feel like this was a really good podcast because it was just like I had a lot of fun just talking to you because it felt like a good combination. Two Metroidvania fans and all that. So once again, I gotta thank you again for coming on, and it was exciting to hear you talk about your AM2R and your future with Moon Studios. I look forward to hearing you, seeing what you do with Moon Studios and all that, and maybe we'll have to have you on, and you can talk about Oi and the Blind Wisp if they'll allow you. But yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, later on, it will be a pleasure as soon as I can.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And for all you listeners out there, this was our AM2R podcast. I have to thank you, Milton, again for coming on. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Infinity Game for more content. There's going to be a lot more coming. I got a lot of cool stuff planned, hopefully. So, once again, thank you all for listening again. Thank you, Milton. And we'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.